Good day to you, good people. Hope you are good today. Today is Tuesday. Welcome to another installment of Testimonial Tuesday, where I try and reference a scriptural quote and bring it into a modern day perspective and application. My name is Kimble Rogers. Testimonial Tuesday today. Today we're speaking about foundation or foundations. Everything that you build needs a foundation. It doesn't matter if you are building a house, a bridge, a fence, a marriage, a family, or even a spiritual life. If you don't have a rock solid foundation, anything you try to build will fail. I've noticed a trend. We don't like to work on foundations. We rather put our effort into the things that we can see. Is it any wonder that we live in a nation of so many failed marriages, relationships, careers, and dreams? Is it any wonder that we live as a community filled with so many failed marriages, relationships, careers, and dreams? We need a solid foundation. So, how do we get there? Well, let's look to Jesus. Specifically, look at what Jesus did in the first chapter of Mark. This chapter outlines the 5 foundations that Jesus built into his life before he launched into his public ministry. When you read through chapter 5, you'll find Jesus living through 5 different scenes, each one illustrating a foundation that he built his ministry on. We can use those same foundations in our own lives. Today, we're going to look at the first 2. Foundation number 1, humility. Jesus actually let people minister to him. The first 8 verses of Mark, chapter 1, tells us about the ministry of John the Baptist. In verse 9, Jesus enters the scene. What's the first thing he does? He gets baptized. So let's back up a step. What is baptism? Baptism is a symbol. It isn't something that saves you. It's not something that makes you a Christian. It's something that represents being united with God. And also it symbolizes a washing of all your sins away, of being reborn into a new life, being born again. And if you aren't baptized as a Christian, I recommend that you do. Jesus' baptism is a big deal. It's reported in about 3 of the 4 Gospels. It's the very first thing that Jesus does in his public ministry. And I think it's really interesting that Jesus' first public act is to let someone else minister to him. This is Jesus we're talking about, the Son of God, the Creator, the King of Kings. But the very first thing he does is be humble enough to let someone else minister to him. So, why is this so important? No one can live a Christian life without power. There is a power that is released when you let someone minister to you. God uses people to lift others up, to provide spiritual strength. If you can't find the humility to let others minister to you, if you don't build your life on that foundation, you can never reach God's full potential for you. Foundation number 2, identity. Jesus listened to the voice of God. Jesus is getting baptized. When he's raised out of the water, here's what happens. Just as Jesus was coming up out of the water, he saw the heavens being torn open and the Spirit descending upon him like a dove, and a voice from heaven says this, "You are my Son, whom I love. With you I am well pleased." That's in Mark chapter 1, verse 10 to 11. Who you end up being depends on the voice you're listening to. It determines whether you are miserable or loving God and life. It determines whether you are discouraged or encouraged. It determines whether you have a future or not, and whether you are delighted or devastated with your life. It's all who you listen to. Who you end up being depends on the voice you are listening to. Our culture would love to tell you that you don't matter. But if you build your life on that message, you'll face nothing but discouragement and despair. Jesus used a very different voice as his foundation, God's voice. Here are the three things that God said to Jesus. They also are three things that he wants to say to you. You are my son. In other words, you belong to me. God is saying, you are in my family. How do you feel about your own children? That's how God feels about you. You belong. Whom I love, you are loved. God's love gives you the number one thing that everybody wants, security. A person who truly loves you will never abandon you. And there is no greater love than God's. With you I am well pleased. You are forgiven. These words give us hope. There is no condemnation for us in Jesus. If you are asking yourself, why am I so discouraged, depressed, and afraid all the time? It's because you are listening to the wrong voices. You have to move to see yourself, how God sees you, instead of how other people tell you you are. If you are asking yourself, why am I so discouraged, pressed and afraid all the time? It's because you are listening to the wrong voices. Here's what God is saying to you. You are my child, whom I love. With you, I am well pleased. Is there anyone today who doesn't need to hear this? Can you imagine the difference that placing your life on those words can make? Listening to God gives you identity, and it's a foundation. You can't afford to live your life without it. But then again, it's your life. So, make it a good one.